This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
In this episode, we're talking about communications in the beginning. In the beginning is really when you're mostly helping your care receiver so that they can maintain some of their independence. Mm-hmm. We have 4 main tips. The first tip is to help them plan their day. The second tip is about simplifying and minimizing.
Yeah.
The third tip is about positive reinforcement and body language. And when I say body language, I mean your body language and their body language.
Yep.
And the fourth tip is about not being scared of the truth they need to hear. But first, let's have a quick, candid conversation around communication.
Welcome. We're Sue Ryan
and Nancy Treaster.
This podcast brings our years of experience in a variety of family caregiving roles to prepare you to navigate your caregiving journey.
We're sharing our personal experiences, not medical advice. And because it's our passion to support you on your journey, we believe no topic is off limits.
We're bringing you practical tips
and candid conversations
about the good, the bad, and
yes, the ugly
in family caregiving.
Let's get started. Communication is about constant adjustment and observing. Observe and adjust. Observe and adjust. And you're going to spend a lot of time understanding what they can, you're understanding what they can understand, but you're going to spend a lot of time trying to figure out what they can understand and then adjusting your communication level and style to help them, as we said, so they can maintain their independence.
Yes.
So let's start with the first tip. The first tip is about helping them plan their day.
Yeah.
It's about understanding what they can accomplish. Because remember, you're observing and you're adjusting the expectations of what they can accomplish. So you're helping them create their list of what they're going to do today that's reasonable, that they can accomplish. And then throughout the day, you're going to come back and prompt them so that they can feel valued, feel accomplished at the end of the day, that they got things done.
Nancy, I really want to reinforce what you just said.
Okay.
So often in the beginning, we'll say, I want to remind them of what to do. And because we're used to being able to remind them of things. When you don't have a neurocognitive disorder, you could say, hey, honey, don't forget to stop and get the milk at the grocery store. With that, they don't remember it. And so your language is very intentional. We're going to prompt them. So we're going to be the one that helps put it in front of them so they are able to remember.
So that is so very important. I love that clarification, because in your mind, you're thinking you're reminding them, right? But you're not. They can't remember. You're not reminding them. And the sooner you can let go of the concept of reminding and accept the concept of prompting, your attitude will be so much better about this whole thing. So
and body language for you and for them, for everybody, it's going to be so much more supportive, and you won't be as aggravated because they don't remember.
That is so true. So true. So I would leave little sticky notes. If it was something that needed to be accomplished at the computer or at my husband's desk, there would be sticky notes. If it was something he needed to accomplish, even that his lunch was in the refrigerator, there's a sticky note on the refrigerator. When we go out with our friends, he would make fun of me that I was the queen of sticky notes and that I just left these crazy sticky notes all over the place. Ha ha. I was leaving them for him, but it did help. And at the end, he thought it was funny, but he felt valued at the end of the day and accomplished. which is really what at this point I was going for.
And he kept his independence longer. Felt like he had it. Yeah. What I did with my husband, Jack, he was a list guy. His lists had lists. And so I created another list. And every evening I would put together a list. And in the morning, we would go over the list. And I would have the list left out where he could see it. And all day long, we would have the list and we would refer to it throughout the day. And I would sometimes say, hey, because he could still read. And I would say, hey, honey, I don't remember what's next on our list. What have we got coming up? And it would remind him to go back and to look at that so that we could make sure that we were doing things, but it also helped him not to have to feel like he needed to remember.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned about he could still read, because there did come a time where I still left notes, even though my husband really couldn't read, because often I would get up before him and go on a run in the neighborhood. This is before I actually got a treadmill so that I didn't leave the house. There became a time where I wasn't comfortable leaving the house, so I had a treadmill, but I would go on a run. And so I literally would put by the coffee maker a picture of a stick person running because I thought he needs to know where I am, but he couldn't read. So that was the best I could. I thought, we're back to hieroglyphics. Things go back. What goes around comes around.
But it worked. It's adaptation. And as over time, these things are going to shift and change. And yet it still supports it. He was used to looking at the sticky note. Now he just saw something differently.
Yes. And it really helps us with tip 2, right? Tip 2 is about simplify and minimize.
Yeah.
So it's an example of simplifying. And simplifying is also adjusting and observing. Observe and adjust. And the same thing about simplification. What you can give them instructions on to do one day will quickly not be the level of instruction they can absorb a week later or 2 weeks later. You can give instruction. Let's say at the beginning, I could tell my husband before we needed to leave the house to go out to lunch, for example, I'd say, can you go get your shower now so that we're ready to go out so we can leave and go out to lunch. Now, you have to give them an entirely inordinate amount of extra time to get the things done, but he could go in, get a shower, come back out dressed, and everything was fine until he can't, until getting a shower and all the things that go with that are just too much. So eventually it's go into the bathroom and say, why don't you take your shower now? We're getting ready to get ready to go out to lunch. And then it's waiting around, maybe inconspicuously, until the shower's done to say, oh, what are you going to wear? And you walk with them to their closet to pick out their clothes because they don't realize that's the next thing they have to do, and so on. I know you have good examples of this too as well, Sue.
Well, it's just, to your point, it's just adapting, and it's thinking like, okay, in the beginning, you could say, go take a shower. And then some of the things that I would do is I would then write down, okay, what is every step of taking a shower? Well, I automatically, if I'm like, okay, I've got to go take a shower, I just unconsciously run through all the things that I need to do and putting the clothes out and all of those things. I literally would sit and write down each step of it. And I got in the routine for myself of figuring out, okay, what does he have? If there are 7 things associated with it or 15 things associated, what could he possibly remember in the very beginning? How do I prompt him? And what does he have the capacity to remember? And then how do I support him with the next step? Those things. And again, those kind of things are going to be shifting over and over.
Right. And we're going to talk in another podcast around bathing and all the steps, how that progresses or digresses, if you will, through the process. But all of these things, grooming, bathing, putting on their clothes, observe what they can do. Don't be shocked when they can't do it at that level of detail the next time. And you have to slowly insert yourself into all these processes. And the level of insertion you have is going to grow, It
is. But again, it's always toward their independence and dignity. I'll share one other quick example. When we would go out to eat with friends, in the beginning, when you're just going out to dinner with friends, you don't think about, well, what are we going to have? You may remember a meal you'd liked before. As their world gets smaller, it's harder for them to concentrate on multiple things. So even if they could still read the menu, they've got other people talking and things like that that could be distracting for them. If we were going to be going to a restaurant, I would pull up the menu online and I would say, hey, honey, I want to just kind of look and see. I know they've made some changes to their menu. We would walk through the menu and kind of pre-decide what it was we thought we wanted to get. Then when we got to the restaurant, I would say, oh, honey, I'm so excited about having such and such that we talked about earlier that just sounded so good when we looked at the menu. And so it would be a little prompter for him of that. And then when the server came, and they ask women first, I would say, this is what I'm going to have. And say, and honey, I'm so excited. Do you still want to have that, whatever it was? So they didn't have to do that. And then the server also didn't recognize there was anything wrong. And we've got another tip for that farther along.
I love that, Sue. I would do something similar, but more when we were at the restaurant. My husband would hold his menu and then look at me like, what are we doing here? And what am I going to do? And I would always pick two things that I thought he might want to choose between. And I'd give him two choices and say, oh, they have filet mignon and they have grilled chicken. Do either one of those sound good to you? Yeah. He would say, I'd like a steak or filet mignon, and all would be good. But no discussion about it. It was really, like you said, to maintain his dignity and his independence so that he could still go out to dinner and feel good about himself. But at the same time, when the waiter would come, because they, thank goodness, do ask the woman first, they would ask me. I would say, I'm going to have this. And I think, you're going to have the filet mignon, right? And that would be the end of it. So it is about, that's part of the minimize. When we say simplify, minimize, that's part of the minimize umbrella, if you will. Meals at restaurants, also meals at home. When I say minimize, I also mean minimize disruptions. So I found when we did meals at home, I needed to mute the TV. I needed to get everything set up on the table before I call my husband to come sit at the table. Because if I had to get up and go get the butter or the salt, as soon as I stood up, he'd stand up. I've lost him. And now 15, 20 minutes later to get him back to the table because he would wander around. It was just, a whole ordeal. So minimize distractions and be as upfront prepared as possible. Was a huge part of how we got through that early on communication and supporting him so that he could maintain his independence.
And to your point, what you've raised is this is going to manifest itself in a variety of different ways. The more we understand about observing and journaling and keeping track of things, when something starts to get out of the ordinary, we can adapt much more easily and much more quickly.
And we're going to talk about a lot more of these things. Like I said, when we talk about bathing and grooming, you're going to hear a lot more about minimizing and simplifying and really the order you can expect things to go in. So let's move on to tip 3. Tip 3 is about positive reinforcement and body language.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not a sappy kind of girl, so you get a little positive reinforcement from me and you should be pretty happy about that. That says a lot. But I hired a part-time caregiver to come in and spend a few hours a week at our house. And she was all about, excellent job using the soap. Great job putting on your underwear. And thank you so much for brushing your teeth. And I was looking at her like she was crazy. But then to see how well my husband responded to all of that positive reinforcement, I changed my whole demeanor. You wouldn't have recognized me. You still wouldn't recognize me because I still do it today. You wouldn't recognize me. I am, thank you. What a great job you're doing. In the middle of the night, I'm changing depends going, thank you. Good job. Good job. I mean, it changed so much our communication. Both, you can't help but say thank you and great job with a smile on your face. So back to body language. It changes the tone of your voice. It changes the look on your face. They're feeding as much off your tone and the look on your face as they are off the words you're saying. And so everybody feels better about what's being said and what's going on. And it creates a much more positive, less fearful scenario.
Well, and to your point, the last thing you said is really, really powerful because we're looking at it sometimes from our lens. They're not sure what it is they should remember or what they don't remember. In the beginning, they don't necessarily remember what they remember or know what they don't remember. And so when they're being given positive reinforcement, it's very similar if you've had a child to reinforcing something positive. They begin to learn that, this is good. So they feel good about what they've done. when they've got that uncertainty and you're reassuring them and calming them, it really helps them to stay positive and more calm as well.
And just, I feel the obligation to give the opposite so that people can understand the difference, which is, why aren't you using the soap?
Oh,
why aren't you brushing your teeth? Why are you brushing your teeth like that? Put your underwear on. Of course you put your underwear on next. That adds no value whatsoever. You're not helping with their dignity. You're not helping them feel good about things.
You're not helping you.
You're demeaning them. Think about the tone of my voice, right? And think about the look on my face when I'm saying those things. I'm creating a antagonistic situation. And then I wonder why the situation's very antagonistic. So positive body language, get at their level, look them in the eye as much as you can, not just from the corner over there, but make sure they have your full attention, and use positive language and positive body language both.
Huge.
The fourth tip is around the truth they need to hear. And Sue, this is really something you coined that I absolutely am so on board with. And I loved it. When you said it to me the first time, I thought that is it. So tell us a little more about it.
One of the things people would talk about is telling the truth. If your caregiver needed to hear something and people are like, well, I'm not going to lie to them. I'm going to tell them what they need to hear. And so a layer of that is being compassionate in the truth and compassionate in what you're sharing. And I took it farther because when I was growing up, we were taught not to lie. I don't lie well. I'm sure I have a tell. It's not a good thing. That's not who I. However, what I recognized with all of the people who I provided care for is that I was telling the truth they needed to hear rather than necessarily what the actual truth was. And to the point we just talked about with body language, with demeanor, with everything, is when we told them what was something that was helpful for them to know rather than what was the actual truth of a situation, it made it easier for them. For example, if we were going to go on a trip and we were going to be going multiple places and we were going to be doing a lot of different things and all this, the truth that was valuable for them to hear is, hey, we're going to go out for a little while. This is exciting. That's all they needed. That's all they needed to know. And when you think about it in terms, and the real takeaway from this is, it is less about what the actual truth is. It's how do we stay in integrity, that we're telling the truth, that we're in alignment with, that's what is most valuable for them to hear.
And to minimize their anxiety, minimize their frustration. You're helping them. That's the hardest part to absorb here, is you're helping them. If you listen to the driving episode, you'll actually hear me talk a little bit about the things I did that were the truth my husband needed to hear about where the keys were, for example, or why the car wouldn't start. But that,
well,
really
and if anybody hasn't heard that, what you did is, in order for him not to get out and drive the car, is because he had already started losing things. What did you simply say to him?
Well, I hid the keys, and then when he couldn't find the keys, I'm like, I don't know where the keys are. So, I don't know. They're lost. So, honestly, and that's just one of a million examples. I honestly think in every podcast, we could have a discussion around the truth they need to hear on that topic, right? So it's one that's pervasive across
it's being other directed, but integrity in integrity with yourself and other directed. Yes.
Well, and that's also really important. I don't want to skim over that. It's not just telling them the truth they need to hear, but when you're down that path, redirecting to something else if you can. So you're not stuck down a rat hole of something that maybe is, not necessarily exactly what's happening. Redirect. We're going to get in the car and go somewhere. Have you got your shoes on yet? And try to change the subject so you don't end up down a rat hole.
Yeah.
All right. Well, in this episode, we talked about communication in the beginning, which is really when we're helping our care receiver maintain as much independence as possible. We talked about 4 main tips. The first tip is about really helping them plan their day. Second tip is around simplify, minimizing distractions, minimizing what they have in front of them. The third tip is really around positive reinforcement and body language. And it's not just our body language, but it's watching their body language too and understanding how to respond to that. And the fourth is don't be scared of the truth they need to hear. Everything you're going through when it comes to communication in the beginning feels very difficult and very strange, and you're adapting and adjusting throughout. Just remember, this is a phase. We have plenty of opportunity to manage through this situation. You will get through this phase. It will end, and it will get better. I promise.
We're all on this journey together. You got this.
Yes, you do.